the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday, May 15th. I hope everybody's having a fantastic beginning of their week. Thanks for joining me. I am still in Rome, and I will. So today will be part 2 of my show on Rome and the history of Rome and the arts in Rome, and we'll talk about that. We'll spend today on that. I know some of you are eager for me to return to the new shows, and I will do that. But you know, not a lot is happening in the world. I have to say, when you step back a little bit and you go on vacation and you scan the news periodically, you realize that, you know, once in a while there are major events that happen that have real significance for a very long time, but mostly it's just the grind of the news is not ultimately that interesting. I will say that maybe the most important item in the news the last couple of days was the fact that in Turkey, the opposition candidate did not beat Erdogan. Erdogan actually won 49.5% of the vote. Because neither candidate got over 50%, it will go for a runoff. Pretty much everybody expects Erdogan to win the runoff. So really, really bad news out of Turkey, where it looks like Erdogan is going to stay in power. After 20 years, he will continue to be in power, and that's not good news. Not good news for the West. I don't think it's good news for Turkey. It's very bad news for Turkey. Not good news for the United States. Not good news for Ukraine. The Russians are celebrating. Maybe the Russians had something to do with the vote. Who knows? I'll start a rumor. Let's start a rumor. Anyway, the election was stolen by Russian bots. But I think that's the most important piece of news. The Ukrainian counteroffensive has not started, although it does look like they've made some progress on certain fronts, and it does look like the Russian army continues to be in complete disarray. And in terms of U.S. politics, everybody's waiting for DeSantis to announce, even though everybody knows or everybody expects it not to make one iota of a difference. Everybody at this point is expecting Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee for president in 2024. So, and maybe the most important item in the news over the last few days has been the fact that the Celtics beat the Philadelphia 76ers and are off to the East Coast finals, Eastern Conference Finals against Miami. I expect the Boston Celtics to beat Miami, go on to the NBA Finals, probably against Denver, and that'll be a good series. So I'm looking forward to being home and watching that series, and for Boston to win. All right, that's my news of the day. Hopefully that'll satisfy some of your desire for more newsy shows. I will get back to more current events, news, and stuff like that tomorrow, soon. Certainly once this trip is over. But I thought, since I am in Rome, and since Rome is such a crucial city to the history of Western civilization, and since I am learning so much or remembering so much about the history of Rome, the history of the Renaissance, not just the Renaissance, the history and then today I was at the Vatican, and both at the Vatican Museum and then at St. Paul's Cathedral. So I thought it was a good opportunity to talk more about Rome and about the perception of, particularly in the Vatican, of power and the role that art played in both kind of helping the Catholic Church establish itself, dominate Western culture and Western civilization for a period and helped them sustain kind of their power and control. So that's what we're going to be covering today, and I will be taking questions. So I don't know how long of a monologue I have, so I will be taking questions on pretty much anything. So feel free to use the super chat to ask questions, and yeah, we'll take it from there. You know, one of the things that as you look, as you observe in Rome, and when you go to the Vatican becomes real, but really as you travel through Rome, all over the place, is you know, really the central role of two figures who dominate the history of this city, and in that sense dominate, in many respects, the history, the aesthetic, and but more than aesthetic, you know, history of Western civilization, at least this period during Western civilization, the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries. And those two period are Michelangelo and Bernini. Michelangelo and Bernini's lifespan just over 200 years, about 210 years, from the birth of Michelangelo to the death of Bernini. Both of them lived very long lives. Both of them lived to be well over 80. I think, well, Bernini, I think 82. I think Michelangelo 86. So both lived into their 80s. There's a gap of about 30 years between their lives. So in total, you get about 200 years in which these two men dominated this part of the world, and in many respects, it had a lasting and a massive impact on Western civilization. Not only were they incredibly impactful, and you might say, well, Michelangelo was born in, I think, 1475, but he had started having an impact at a very young age, right? He's David and his Pietà, you know, those are done very early in his life, in his early 20s. If you look at Bernini, he starts having an impact in his early 20s. His great sculpture, the great sculptures of Bernini, are all done in his 20s. And yet both of them not only having a massive impact through their art on art, aesthetics of the period and all periods that follow, but they also become you know, icons of the period. They have an impact on all the other artists who follow. You know, I'll talk about the impact Michelangelo has on Raphael. We saw that today in the Vatican Museum. But they also are architects. They're architects of significant churches, of significant, you know, just arches and gates and staircases, and everywhere you go, this was done by Michelangelo, this was done by Bernini, this was designed by Michelangelo, this was designed by Bernini. And it's on and on and on throughout, you know, throughout the whole city and throughout this whole era. These two men really dominated the Renaissance and the period. You know, Bernini, of course, creates and is the key figure in the Baroque, and they signify also this real transition between a Renaissance church and a Baroque church, and a Renaissance church that has a particular nature, and then a Baroque church that has a very different nature, because the church in the Baroque period is having to deal with a Reformation and is engaged in its own counter-Reformation, which was quite impactful. So they all have to deal with their own politics. And ultimately that politics, I think, gets reflected in the art and really even in the architecture. The politics of it, the needs of the church, you know, kind of dictate art and aesthetics and architecture and city design during this period. And really the thing that comes to the forefront when you travel through Italy, here in Rome, in Florence, is the centrality and the dominance, of the Catholic Church over everything that happens here, both politically and culturally. And of course, I think the Counter-Reformation and the Baroque ultimately lead us to a decline in that power, and a decline not only in the power of the Church, but as I talked about the other day, a decline ultimately in the political power of Italy and the political power of the Church as a consequence, because the Counter-Reformation basically causes culture to stagnate. It causes politics, the economy to stagnate. It causes every aspect to stagnate, versus Northern Europe, which is gung-ho and pushing ahead and taking the ideas that they have integrated from the Renaissance, the ideas of Greece, the ideas of Rome, the ideas really of Greek philosophy that the Renaissance embraces. The Church turns against those once the Reformation starts, and of course in the North, the Reformation allows for a degree of freedom, a degree of liberty, intellectual liberty, that is unheard of in the South, particularly in the anti-Reformation South, in the anti-Reformation Italy, where in the South you can't think new thoughts, you can't push against the dogma, against conventional ideas, and that is what causes Italy ultimately to decay and Europe ultimately to flourish, and the whole center focus shifts to the North, where there is people are open to think. All right, so that's quick overview, kind of historical, but let's start with Michelangelo and his role in Rome, and then we'll get to Bernini and kind of the interplay between them and the popes. I mean, one of the things that's happening in Renaissance Italy and Renaissance in the Renaissance churches, that the popes are consolidating power, the Vatican is consolidating power, and the key big important families of Italy are consolidating power. They're becoming wealthier. There's more economic activity going through Italy. The Renaissance is creating a real rebirth, a real excitement, a real energy around arts and around aesthetics, but all that art and aesthetics needs some economic activity to fund it, and that economic activity starts happening. You get the Medici banks. You get much more industry and agriculture at scale. Nothing as compared to what's going to happen a few hundred years later with the Industrial Revolution, but this is the beginning. You don't get an Industrial Revolution without a Renaissance. And during this period, the church is consolidating power. The church is accumulating wealth by basically taxing it away from people. And it is accumulating political power. It now has a military force, it has generals, and it's becoming a much more secular institution. There's some question about how many of the popes were, how religious the popes actually were. Some popes, at least 2 of the popes during this period, never attended Mass, never performed Mass. They weren't interested. Many of the popes were super corrupt. Many of the popes had children, had mistresses, had lovers, had orgies in the Vatican. So this is a period of where the church is somewhat secularized. It's infused with the philosophy of humanism, of these Neo-Platonism, and the emphasis is on establishing the papal spiritual authority over man's soul. So the popes feel that this new energy coming out of the Renaissance is threatening, and they have to establish their power, and they have to solidify it. And part of the way in which they establish their power and solidify this power over the peoples that populate Europe at the time is through art, is through storytelling, right? It's through storytelling. And a lot of what the church is trying to do is say, look, we are the true inheritors of our message, I'll put it this way, not an inheritance, our message is the message of God. We are in communication with God. Again, whether they believed it or not, this had incredible power over the masses and provided them with spiritual legitimacy. We are connected directly through Jesus and ultimately through Moses to God himself. And we as popes, we as the Vatican, we as the Catholic Church are responsible for this string, and we get our legitimacy from these connections, and we need to find every way we can in order to establish these connections. And if you look at the art of this period, the religious art, the extent of it, the degree in which it is produced, this art is trying to create this view of Christianity's dominance over the spiritual world, of the link of Christianity back to Jesus in the Old Testament, and ultimately to a God. It's trying to create an entire. It's taking the mythology that is in the New Testament, in the Old Testament, and it wants to present it to the masses. Remember, most people during this period could not read. Indeed, a small minority, certainly in the Renaissance, a small minority of people could read. This is before the printing press. So, most people had a vague notion of what Christianity was. They went to church, the priest would yell at them, they would feel appropriately guilty, and they would go and live their lives. But there was no real conception, no real understanding, and no real knowledge of the stories of the mythology that is Christianity. What the popes do during this period is they bring to the forefront the artists to tell the stories. And it truly is stunning when you go to museum after museum after museum. You see the same, you see the stories repeated, in slightly different presentation, but the stories are repeated, and you go, why the hell? You must have had this if you go to museums. And somebody asked, is Rome versus visiting? Absolutely. I mean, I've done shows about this. You guys need to travel more. You guys have got to get out there and visit the world and see the treasures and look at the history. And we're so consumed by the politics of the day that we lose all context of the values that are available to us in the world out there. Rome is a jewel. It's not a city I would want to live in. It's not a city I would want to keep coming back to. But it's a city you have to see. This is my third trip to Rome. I don't know if I'll ever come back for an extensive tour. I might once more before I die. But this is a place you need to see. You need to see once, twice, three times. You learn so much every time. You experience so much every time. I mean, seeing. Today we saw the Pietà and Michelangelo's Pietà at the Vatican, seeing the Sistine Chapel. But even seeing all this religious art is so eye-opening, inspiring, interesting, challenging, exciting, and emotional. Because the themes are often universal themes. Otherwise it wouldn't have worked as religious art. So one of the questions, if you go to a lot of Renaissance museums, I know a friend of mine, oh God, another Jesus, and another Jesus, and another Jesus. The same, the Jesus and the Virgin Mary and Peter or Paul or whatever, and the same configuration, the same people all the time, story after story. Each one done differently by different artists, but they're all the same stories. And you go, why the hell did they paint the same thing over and over and over again? And of course, the obvious reason is that they had no photography, they had no copying, they had no print books. You painted I don't know, Pietà. Pietà is Mary mourning over the death of her son, Jesus Christ. And you do one, and that's it. And some people will see it, not that many people will see it. But like there's one in Florence, and what about Rome? Shouldn't Rome have a Pietà? And what about this other place? People didn't travel, people didn't see stuff. And again, there was no copying, there was no photography or books or art books or things like that. So while we go to a museum and we see the same story in painting over and over and over again, which is super interesting because you see the different artists' interpretation and different periods of time, different periods in history where they did this. But at the time, people only saw 1 or 2 or 3. I mean, they didn't experience this. There were no museums. Museums, here's an interesting thing. Museums are modern phenomena. The first museum, I think, was here in Rome. A public museum was in the 19th century. There was no conception of museums. There was no conception of putting artwork in a public space and people coming to see it the way we do today. So people collected art, but people had, this guy's collection had one Pietà, and that guy's collection had another one. This guy had a painting of this story. And if the church wanted to spread the stories, the ideas, the mythology, if it wanted these stories and mythologies to become part of their culture, part of what dominated people's lives, if they wanted to humanize these religious stories and turn them into something that is relatable to human beings so that they could relate to their religion and they could relate to the different characters, then what they did was they used the artists to do that. They commissioned the artists to keep painting the same stories over and over again in different formats, in different places, in different during different periods, in different styles, so as to constantly put a face to and an image to the stories that people might have heard or might not have heard in church. And this is how they spread the religion. This is how they humanized the religion. This is how they made it real for people. So that when you see Christ and Mary, you get the real sense of the enormity of the death of this man and the effect it has on his mother. And you see that in Michelangelo's Pietà, but you see it in other the same. Or, one of the things you see over and over and over and over and over again, over and over and over and over again, is Jesus on a cross. But again, there is a purpose here. It is to constantly remind you, what it is that you're worshiping. It constantly reminds you the sacrifice that was done in your name, for you. It's constantly to remind you, but at the same time, it's also to humanize Jesus, to make Jesus real, to make the suffering real. So you see him there, you see him in pain, you see him in agony, you see his body. Okay, now, wow, this is a human being. I mean, the Son of God seems a little abstract, and Jesus on a cross in a storybook, when he's also the Son of God and part of this, it's all, but now you make it real, now you make it concrete in front of me. You've concretized this ideal. And of course, this ideal changes as ideas changed about human beings. So he starts out as this shriveled, almost abstract human. I mean, it's obviously a human being, but he's shriveled. He's not really human, not really alive. And partially that's all they could sculpt. Partially they didn't want to sculpt human beings. But then you get to Jesus on the cross in the Renaissance. I mean, now you have a real human being, and often now Jesus has become a hero, not just a hero of spirit, which is what he was, I think, in the Middle Ages. Because the body wasn't there. The body was just a symbolic almost. In the Renaissance, Jesus becomes a physical hero. He has this amazing body, and you see this body on the cross, and given the spirit of the Renaissance, when you're discovering Greek sculptures and you're seeing and you're rediscovering the beauty of the human form, and you're rediscovering this potential of human life and potential of human happiness and potential of human success with the kind of the elevation of Aristotelian ideas. Now you're seeing this potential crushed on this cross. It makes it all the more powerful. And it wouldn't have meant anything to the Renaissance audiences to have just a symbolic man on a cross. Now it has to be a real man, and not just any man, Now, the Renaissance is engaged in hero worship, so the man on the cross has to be a hero. And that heroism is manifest in a muscular, beautiful body. So Jesus is transformed, from the Middle Ages into the Renaissance. But all of this is done, and so much of the focus of all this art is done, if you will. To call it propaganda is terrible, because usually propaganda uses very bad arts and very shallow arts or not art at all. It's propaganda. But the Catholic Church had the advantage of being able to rally to its cause and to its belief set the most talented, the most amazing artists in all of human history. Michelangelo was as far as we can tell, was a real believing Christian, and became, I think, more religious as he aged. And you can tell in his artwork. So you can get a Michelangelo to come and paint the Sistine Chapel. Not only is he, the era's most amazing artists, not just the era, maybe all of human history's most amazing artists, but he is also somebody who believes. So when he's painting the Sistine Chapel, he believes in what he's doing. And the Sistine Chapel is amazing. It's just a stunning work. It is massive. It took Michelangelo 4 years to paint, which is amazing how fast that is, given the size of the Sistine Chapel, given the complexity of it. This is just the ceiling. We'll get to and he does it when he's relatively young. But it takes him 4 years. It's very difficult because it's painting a ceiling. So imagine what that does to your neck. Imagine the stress, the difficulty. He starts at the beginning of painting the Sistine Chapel. He uses apprentices, primarily apprentices who are experts in painting on walls, painting on a ceiling, because that's not his expertise. He learns that particular skill from them, and then he fires them all, and he paints the rest all by himself. And when you look at this, and you look at the stunning work that's up there, and you can't really appreciate the work that's on the Sistine Chapel without, let me just see what's going on, without also without fully understanding what happens before and how it impacts after. So art before this is, it's to a large extent, it's static. It appears static. It's not completely static, but relative to Michelangelo, it's static. Again, people are not fully alive. They don't have kind of the muscle, the tension. And Michelangelo is a leap artistically. Suddenly, people are alive. People are in motion. People are in tension. The muscles are showing. They are strong, powerful. And it's a revolution. When Raphael, our guide today was telling us, Raphael goes into the Sistine Chapel. He can't wait for it to be finished, right? But Michelangelo won't let anybody see it, so it's locked. Only he can be there. The Pope once in a while comes in to bug him. But other than that, people, they're not allowed into the Sistine Chapel. And Raphael supposedly bribes a god to let him in one night, and he goes there, and he's blown away. He's just blown away by what he sees. It's art that nobody had ever seen before, what Michelangelo was doing there. And it completely changes the way he then goes and paints, the way he then goes and paints his figures. And again, he makes them more dynamic, more muscular, more engaged, and much more alive, much more alive. Gone are the kind of, well, not gone completely, but a lot less of the kind of pretty, static, beautiful Raphaels that you see early on, and suddenly there's this dynamism and excitement that he's learning from Michelangelo. And I think last time I talked to you about Caravaggio seeing the Sistine Chapel and blowing him away and changing everything for him and inspiring him to be the kind of artist he becomes. Clearly, it all inspires Bernini later on. So Michelangelo is this transformative artist. But what is the story he's telling on the ceiling? It's all a biblical story. It's often basically from the creation of Adam all the way through the Old Testament. God creating. Well, it's before the creation of Adam. God is creating the universe. Is creating light and day. He is creating Adam. He creates a woman out of Adam. There's Noah's Ark. So it's the story of the Old Testament leading up to the story of Moses. Then there's a panel of paintings around the story of Moses, which is done by other Renaissance painters, and you can see the difference. I mean, these are great painters like Botticelli and others, but you can see the difference between them and Michelangelo. It really is a leap. It really is a massive difference, and it's glorious. The colors are glorious. The figures are glorious. They're strong. They're powerful. It doesn't matter that they're biblical. It doesn't change anything from I'm sure it does from the perspective, if you're religious and you see it, wow. I mean, here is a story that I kind of heard a little bit about in the church, but here it is in real terms. Here's God creating Adam. Here's the Garden of Eden. Here's what it means. It's right there in front of you. It concretizes these stories in a way that's super powerful, in the way that the Catholic Church realized and understood the power of concretizing these stories and making them real and making them beautiful and making them inspiring, and associated now, inspiring, beautiful, connecting that with Christianity, with the church. Somebody says, didn't Michelangelo meet Da Vinci? Yeah, they met. Michelangelo didn't get along with anybody. He was not a likable guy. He didn't get along with Leonardo. He didn't get along with Raphael. But particularly Raphael, who was younger than Michelangelo, they all admired him greatly. I mean, clearly he was the great artist of the era. All right, so that's the Sistine Chapel. What's interesting, really interesting, is in the Sistine Chapel, you've got the ceiling, but then you've got one of the walls, which Michelangelo comes back, I think it's 30 years later, and paints Judgment Day. And this is a very different Michelangelo now. This is, of course, the topic is Judgment Day, but this is generally, again, you can tell in the art of Michelangelo, real transformation from the David, even the Pietà, the Sistine Chapel, to his later work. And Judgment Day is a painting of much more anger. It is a painting of the final judgment and the people going up to heaven and the people descending into hell. And it's stunning. It truly is stunning. The number of naked figures on that wall, twisted and again beautifully done. The musculature, the energy, the passion. I mean, it's a scary image, particularly if you're a believer. If you're a believer and you look at this and, whoa, I want to be on that side of the wall, not on this side of the wall, because it's clear, and there's Jesus dividing everybody up between heaven and hell. Uncompromising. And when the Pope commissioned him to do this wall, one of the things that's unique to Michelangelo among all the artists there is nobody interfered with what he did. Nobody second guessed it. Indeed, when people saw what he was painting, when some of the cardinals saw what he was painting, they complained bitterly to the Pope because they said, "This is the Sistine Chapel, and look at all the nudity on this wall." And the Pope said, "It's Michelangelo. You don't change anything by Michelangelo." Now, much of the nudity was eliminated after Michelangelo died, after Michelangelo's death. which is good because he would have hated to see it. Different coverings of penises were put in place during the Reformation. Indeed, the argument was that it was either to destroy the painting completely, to wipe it clean, or to cover up some genitals. And the perspective of the historians is, well, at least they didn't destroy the painting, they left the painting, because they were ready to destroy it. This was the Counter-Reformation was ready to destroy many paintings, many artworks, in the name of preserving the faith, right? In the name of preserving the religion. So, I mean, wow, what an amazing painting! Just a number of figures. It's funny because all the art, they all describes this, but Michelangelo uses this to settle some scores. So people he doesn't like are all going to hell. Indeed, the cardinal that complained to the Pope about the nudity in the painting is, God, I forget the name of the Lord of the Underworld. He's the guy responsible for the underworld, and he's got a snake kind of grabbing onto his genitals. So a very, 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 very uncomfortable position for this guy to be in. Again, this guy complained to the Pope, how could he depict me this way? And the Pope just shrugged it off. It's Michelangelo, leave him alone. Fig leaves, yes, fig leaves, kind of fig leaves, or they didn't use fig leaves, they also used cloth. They hired a painter after Michelangelo was dead, they hired a painter to cover up the genitals in various ways. Anyway, this is a truly striking. If you're in Rome, you've got to go to the Sistine Chapel. You've got to spend some time there. Your neck will hurt because you're looking up. There's a ton of people there. It's crowded. People are yelling. It's not the greatest experience in the world from that perspective, but you've got to see it. You've got to go see it. So that is kind of the use by the popes of Michelangelo, and again throughout his life, Michelangelo is used by the popes to, he designs the main part of St. Peter's Basilica is a design by Michelangelo. Now it's later changed. Michelangelo, his church is later, the structure of it is later changed from his design. But the core element of the church is still there. The dome is a Michelangelo designed dome. I mean, this is not what Michelangelo wanted to do. This is not what Michelangelo would have preferred to do. He spent much of his time, and I think this is part of his anger and resentment and malevolence towards later in his life, was that he spent so much time not doing what he really wanted to do, which is sculpt. And not really doing what he wanted to do, which is sculpt what he wants to sculpt. He spent years and years and years on the tomb of Julius II, the Pope, which was never really finished. He spent years on the Sistine Chapel, which he didn't really want to paint. He spent years doing architecture, which he didn't really want to do, architecture and engineering, really. He wanted to sculpt, and he was not allowed to sculpt. I mean, one of the great tragedies is the lack of freedom for geniuses like Michelangelo. But we get to benefit from the things that he did do and see. Let's see. Rob says the ceiling has undergone a major restoration in recent years. Yeah, the restoration was finished about 4 years ago. They took away all and you see this in a lot of places. They took away the grime, all the residue that is left from the periods where all the lighting was from candlelight and the smoke, and that created a layer on the paintings, and they took that layer off and revealed the true colors that Michelangelo actually used, and that has brought the ceiling alive. But when you go, definitely look at the Last Judgment and the power of the Last Judgment. And remember, think of yourself as a Christian. Think of yourself as a believer looking at this and what kind of impact this has, and how, again, this is used as a tool of power over the kind of the spiritual realm, over you better behave because this is what happens. And you don't want to be on that side of the painting. You don't want to be on part of the painting that's going to hell. So behave yourself and take this Christianity, take your religion seriously, and take these popes seriously, and take these cardinals seriously. They're the bosses in the spiritual realm. They make it all, they make it all possible. So the use of art to establish spiritual control, massive. And you walk in any church in Rome, and you see the use of art all over the place to do exactly that, to tell the stories and move the believers in ways that you couldn't do without the help of aesthetics, without the help of artwork. All right. One of the things, so that's that. I want to say, let me just say, I highly recommend the Raphael rooms in the Vatican. They are beautiful. They're amazing. The School of Athens, of course, is there, and you've probably all seen the poster of the School of Athens. And one of the things that really stuns you when you walk into that room is how big the School of Athens is in real life. Much, 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 much bigger than the biggest posters you've seen of it, and how alive the figures are, and how the whole setup is exciting and amazing and beautiful and moving. And one of the figures is actually Leonardo da Vinci is Plato, and then Michelangelo is one of the characters in the School of Athens as well. But the School of Athens, the real thing, is definitely worth seeing as compared to the poster. You can't even compare it. And the other thing to note in the Vatican Museum is just, and this is true of everything related again to the Catholic Church in this period, is how important it was for them to preserve Roman art and to link and relate themselves to the Romans. And this has to do more with political power and their legitimacy as political rulers. They viewed themselves, these popes viewed themselves as the heirs of the Roman Empire, of the Roman emperors. They viewed themselves as the true heirs of Roman emperors. They believed they should have political power in addition to the religious power that they had. They wanted to control their political power, and in order to establish a link to the Romans, they copied the Romans wherever and whenever they could, and they associated themselves with Rome. So they bring into the Vatican all this Roman sculpture, and they bring into the Vatican Roman marble, and they bring in the Roman architecture, and they adopt for themselves this connection to Rome. Again, storytelling is so powerful. The ability to tell a story, to concretize for people who you are and what you are. You're not just this church. You're also an heir of an empire. You're also the aesthetic, religious and political heir. And they can do this because Constantine, of course, converted to Christianity. He was an emperor, and the final Roman emperors were Christian, and they could say now, as Pope, I am basically continuing that tradition, because they wanted that kind of worldly power. They never had it, they never got it, but they wanted that kind of worldly power in this world, in addition to the spiritual power, the religious power, and you see that in the way in which they embrace everything Roman. They embrace the Roman Empire. You'd think that they would reject Rome, right? Because Rome was about persecuting the Christians, but no, they actually embrace it and they bring it in, and they view the pagans as great, but that Christianity supersedes them, and that they are the heirs in every respect. And this political power becomes more and more and more important to the Christians, to the Vatican and to the popes, as we move into the post-Renaissance period, and we move it to the first real major challenge to the Catholic Church, which is the Reformation. And suddenly, Christians all over Europe are saying no to the imposition of the Catholic Church's power, whether it's England going off on its own, whether it's Martin Luther, Calvin, and the rest of the Reformation and the Protestant world, just basically ignoring and rejecting the power of the Catholic Church. Now, not only does this lead to hundreds of years of some of the most brutal wars in all of human history, Christians have a unique place in hell as some of the most murderous people ever in terms of their campaigns. People always cite how murderous the Muslims were, and they were, but the Christians are just as murderous. The 30-year war, the 100-year war, and gazillions of little wars in between, Protestants slaughtering Catholics, Catholics slaughtering Protestants, all for for power, all for this power. And the Vatican wants to really make it clear that they are Christianity. There's only one Christianity, and it is them. And that they dwarf anybody else, that they are bigger, better, more powerful, more stronger, and that they intend and they plan, and they are the force to be reckoned with. And if you go to the Vatican, the whole design of the Vatican is built. It's the biggest, what do you call it, square? It's not exactly square, but it's kind of a squarish shape. The biggest square in the world at the time. It's this massive space. It's surrounded by these massive columns that are kind of enveloping you. So when you're in the middle, you get enveloped by them. The way in is not the way in we have today, which is a big boulevard, but two little alleys that lead into this massive square purposefully so that you, as the pilgrims come up, they're overwhelmed by the size. And then St. Peter's it was changed from Michelangelo's design, which is still a very large church, but relatively small. And it's a pagan cross, what's it called, the Greek cross? It's just a simple cross, not the Christian cross, the long cross. It's turned into a long cross ultimately by Bernini, who designs the long piece of it, but in order to make sure that it is the biggest, greatest cathedral in the entire world, that nothing can match it, that it has that claim and it cannot be touched. You come into the square and you're just overwhelmed, and then of course it's surrounded by the sculptures of you've got the disciples up with Paul and Peter and the church. You've got the prophets all around. It's just this imposing thing where the church is saying, nobody's bigger than us, nobody's better than us, and we can take care of you. We are all powerful. And it's supposed to convey that. And this is part of the politics of the whole thing. And then you walk into St. Peter's Cathedral. It's just massive, and it's tall, and it's huge, and it's long, and it's filled with these massive sculptures. Some of them really, really good, some of them just mediocre. Of course, Michelangelo's Pietà is there. That's reason enough to go there. It's reason enough to step into the Vatican, is to see the Pietà. But it's also got some Berninis. It's just got some magnificent, and of course Bernini, who is the dominant sculptor and the dominant artist and the dominant architect of the 17th century, 1600s in Rome. He touches everything. He gets all the commissions. He again, everything. Bernini designed this, designed that, designed this. Early on, he was primarily a sculptor. Later, he became architect, and his workshop did the sculptures, and the sculptures on bridges, the sculpture everywhere is Bernini has touched everything, almost all of it, in the name of the Pope again, and a lot of it again is to project this papal power, to project the grandeur, to project strength, it works. It works in the sense that, and particularly again, if you're a believer and you walk into this is, and today the Pope stands there in the balcony or the terrace, and 200,000 people can be crammed into the square, And these are signs of power. These are signs of political power and signs of influence. And they use these tools. They're so effective at using art and using architecture and using just the physical space to project both spiritual and material power. And again, Bernini is there at the beginning of the decline of Rome, beginning of the decline of the Catholic Church, and he is doing everything as he can to bolster the appearance of power, the appearance of strength, just as everything is declining. Tomorrow we're going to go see Bernini's masterpieces at the, yesterday, or the day before yesterday when I did the show in Raw, I kept calling it the Uffizi Gallery. Of course, that is a mistake. The Uffizi Gallery is in Florence. We're going to the Borghese Gallery, which has the Bernini sculptures. Again, a must-see. If you're in Rome, these are some of the greatest, by far, some of the greatest sculptures ever made. The mastery of, I think there's only, Michelangelo's the only one who comes close, who exceeds Bernini in the mastery of marble. And you can see the big differences between Bernini and Michelangelo. For Bernini, everything is about motion. Everything is about action. And this has a lot to do, I think, with the changing philosophy and the changing times between kind of the Renaissance period, which is, I think, far more spiritual in many respects, and the time of Bernini, which is far more about power. So I think the most striking, and I'll just end with this, the comparison between Michelangelo's David and Bernini's David. And I encourage you all to look this up online, but I really encourage you to go to Florence and see Michelangelo's David and come to Rome and see Bernini's David. Michelangelo's David is all about, in a sense, spiritual power. It's all about confidence and determination and self-esteem, and it's all about the anticipation of action, not the action itself. It's the tension, the stress, the power before the act, the preparedness, the focus, the concentration are before the act. It's David with the sling in his hand, looking at Goliath in the moments before he's about to kill Goliath, the moment that he's staring at this giant in front of him with this confident look, little frown of worry. After all, you're staring at a giant. But this posture of stress, but confidence. And it is, it's just this amazing portrayal of self-esteem and strength and confidence pre-action. Bernini is in the moment that David is twisted with the sling in motion, about to let the rock loose on Goliath. So it is the actual act, not the act of chopping his head off, not the act of standing victorious over Goliath, which a lot of Renaissance sculptors have, but no, this is the twisted body in action, an athlete in action, about to sling this rock into the face of Goliath. And so it's a lot more action-driven, action movie, as compared to the kind of in many respects static kind of David, Michelangelo's David, ready for action, but not in the act itself. In Bernini, it's full-fledged. It's all about the action. So it doesn't have that quiet power that Michelangelo's does, but it has this intensity and this confidence of man as an actor. Again, the strong face, the confidence, the knowledge of what one is doing. The self-esteem is still there, but it's a different form. And it's a masterpiece. It's just extraordinarily, he's alive. He could be, this is an athlete in action, in motion. And it truly is stunning. And I encourage everybody to go and see it. And you can see some of the other Bernini sculptures in the Borghese Gallery, where you can see where a hand touches flesh, you can see the indentation in the marble of that flesh being touched, that flesh being squeezed. You can see leaves. There's the story of, I forget her name, she turns into, the rape of what's her name, she turns into a tree, and you can see some part of her hands turning into a tree, and you can see the leaves, these thin elements of marble that are just beautiful and astounding. But it's everything about Bernini is action and movement and passion. There's massive emotion. There's no, David is restrained. You feel the emotion when you see David, but he's super, cool and rational and ready. With Bernini, the emotion is all out there. This art is called mannerism. I think because of the expression of emotion. We saw a sculpture in a church yesterday, I think, of this woman. It doesn't. The title is just her name, and she is clearly touching. She's clearly in a moment of ecstasy, right? Now you'd assume it's a religious ecstasy because it's in a niche in a church. It's in a it's a religious piece, and yet she's clearly touching her nipple, and her breast and her nipple, and she looks like she's in the throes of sexual ecstasy, and you can see that emotion in her face, and that's the kind of expression and emotion that you get in Bernini sculptures that you just don't get in the Renaissance, and you don't get anywhere close later. Certainly not, I don't know, in the neoclassical period where they're trying to imitate the Greeks. It brings a humanism, a real humanity to these sculptures. It makes them real and it makes them feeling beings, which I think is really, really important to art, to get the sense that the thing. So it's, again, the differences between Michelangelo and Bernini, maybe two greatest sculptors and sculptors of all of history. To see them and compare them and to see the strengths that each one has. I don't think they have weaknesses, but the strengths they each have. They prefer Michelangelo's David, but you still have, which I think is the greatest sculpture ever, but you still, you have to admire the stunning beauty and the ability of the artist in the Bernini's David. I'll just say this one other thing about, you see all this art all over Rome, and one of the things that struck me is, look how many people could do this, and there were a lot of people who were pretty good. They might not have been Michelangelo Bernini, but they were a level below, and maybe 2-3 levels below, but even 2-3 levels below is pretty good, and really good for any other country in the world. The concentration of talent in Italy at this period of time was truly stunning. And of course, artists came here and studied and took it back. And many of the Flemish artists, many of the Northern European, great artists of the Northern European came here to study and then went north. And what struck me is, and one of the differences between this art and what's called modern art, is when you see great art, you know there's talent behind it. You know that somebody had to know a lot, think a lot, study a lot, really figure it out. Just like when you see an engineering feat, or when you see a great bridge or a skyscraper, you know real work had to go into it, real thinking, real planning. When you see a chunk of marble that's turned into a magnificent sculpture, the talent, the skill, the work, the hard work, not just the physical work, immense physical work to chop away at this, but also the mental work that has to go into this, and figuring it out and planning and devising and creating a little leaf out of a piece of marble that's connected to everything else, We saw today a massive relief sculpture with three-dimensional figures, and then two-dimensional, so various levels of relief, all carved out of one block of marble. And you go, whoa, the talent. And the same with the paintings. The same with Greek sculpture and Greek sculpture, and Roman sculpture. And then compare that to the nonchalance of the modern artist, splashing paint on a canvas, splashing a line there and another line over here, and it's just the ease of it, the lack of any talent, the lack of any work, the lack of any thought, the lack of any effort. And that, to me, is a big part of the reveal. How can it be great if there's no if no skill needed to be done in order to do it? If no, if it was easy to I don't know, design a microchip, we wouldn't be excited about engineering. It can't be that stuff just happens like that, just splashing, or just, okay, I'll just make this into a round thing. I'll just take a piece of marble and carve it into a round thing. I mean, that's just, what is that? There's no thought, there's no talent, there's nothing that goes into it. It's a joke, and this is why a lot of times when you have children going to modern art museums, they say, oh, I could do that, I could make that. Looks like one of my drawings. Yeah, but no child would ever say that. Nobody would ever say that, looking at the Sistine Chapel, or looking at a Raphael painting, or looking at a Bernini sculpture. I wouldn't even know where to start. And you need real talent, skill, and thinking in order to produce that. And that suggests that it's something special. Something that is done effortlessly, with no thought, is not going to be anything special. All right, that'll be my series on Rome, for what it's worth. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and yeah, let me know if you like these kind of things, discussions of history and art and these kind of topics. I know we get fewer views, particularly live views. I think there'll be more later, but and we get less super chat, out of this. But hopefully there are enough of you that really like this and enjoy it, that it's worth me continuing to do them. All right, let's look at the super chat and cover some of these topics. Let me just say a few thank yous. Thank you, Wes. Thank you, Jonathan Honing. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Kim. These are all people who've given some money. Wes, $50. Thank you, Wes. In support of the show. So thank you all, guys. All right, Andrew, well, let me just do this. Yeah, let's start with Andrew. Andrew says, are there any great artists today? If not, why? I don't think they are. I mean, there might be, and you could argue that there might be great artists in the movie industry, although I don't think on the same scale as any of this, in terms of their personal genius. No, I mean, is there anybody in music today that is a Verdi or a Beethoven? Is there anybody in sculpture and painting that is a Michelangelo or Raphael or even 19th century, some of the great 19th century painters and sculptors? No, I mean, there's just nobody who is of that level. Now, I've seen some good sculptors today that are doing good work. I've seen some good painters that do good work. You can see them here or there, if you travel and you go to galleries. So good artists do exist. Are they great artists that are really doing things that are new, exciting, thrilling, of this caliber? I don't know. I don't think so. And if they are, there are very, very few of them, that are. Why? I think a lot of reasons. I think whether we live in a culture that doesn't seem to care about great art, doesn't value it, diminishes it. I think the quote modern art movement has destroyed art because it has made art into this meaningless, talentless activity. It's diminished art of greatness. It's eliminated greatness from art. So I think that's demoralized people. I think philosophically, great art requires, and this is why there was no great art in the Middle Ages. Great art requires great vision, a great positive view of the world, a great mission to be achieved. Great art is the art of the Renaissance through the 19th century. That's it. And in Greece and Rome. And even Rome is mostly second-handed in the sense that it's copying Greece. You've got a great art period, and you've got the Renaissance through the end of the 19th century. And a little bit of here and there, some early 20th century stuff. But really, those are the great periods. And what is unique about those great periods? What's unique about those great periods is they're very positive periods. They're periods that have a mission, where people have a mission. They want to convey a certain view of man, a certain view of the world, a certain view of reality, and it's a positive one. Or at the very least, it's a grand one. Even if it's not positive, it's grand. And today, nobody has a grand vision of the world. Everything's mediocre. Everything's blah. The grand vision of the world today is conveyed in superhero movies, right? And this is why I think movies is the closest. It's just like the best composers today write music for the movies. Maybe the best directors or the best movie writers are the equivalent of some of the better artists of the past. But there are lots of people out there in the world I know that are incredibly talented in painting and drawing. But they live in a culture that doesn't value that. They live in a culture that doesn't teach them how to do it. There are very few academies in the world. If they go to university to learn how to do it, they'll be told, stop it. Stop trying to represent reality. Stop trying to be so so accurate. Stop this. You just feel it. Just throw onto the canvas what you feel. Stop trying to be representational. So there's no way to learn this stuff. So there's some schools. There's a school in Florence. There's a school in Barcelona. There's a school a couple of schools in the United States where they're still taught kind of the classical techniques. But this is nothing as compared to the grand academies of the 19th century, right? Or the workshops where you learned on the job during the Renaissance and later periods. I mean, there were apprenticeships, and there were a lot of artists. There were a lot of people engaging in this work. You could learn from a lot of people. There's nobody to learn from today, and there's no market. There's nobody to buy this stuff, right? We were walking by a antique store the other day, and there's this gorgeous sculpture, really, really pretty, of a young woman. She's kind of in a twisted pose. And she's looking at she's kind of doing her hair, and she's looking at a mirror, and there's this little mirror there, and she's looking at it. And it's a piece made in marble, and it's made in the late 19th century. It's a one-of-a-kind original 19th century marble piece, well made, well done. Right, original. There's only one kind of the world. I thought, I don't know, $10,000, certainly $5,000, $1,600. I mean, we were tempted to buy it. We didn't because we've got a lot of sculpture, and I didn't love the piece. I liked it. I didn't love it. But somebody should love it, It's good enough to be loved, and 1,600 suggests that there's no market for it. There's just no market for it. And that's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. And this is, and so imagine if you're a young artist today, and you're going to paint and sculpt representational art, great representational art. Who would you learn from? Who would inspire you? And then who would buy your stuff? It's non-existent. And so there are a few, but it's tough. So those are some of the reasons. But I think the main reason The reason that dominates this is culture, which is dominated by ideas. So we have bad ideas that create a bad culture. And it's a culture that values material wealth, but doesn't know what to do with that wealth. It's the kind of culture where some of the most depressed people are the most successful people. So some of the richest people are the most depressed people because they have wealth and they don't know what to do with it, because it's all about the wealth, and they've been taught that it's all about the wealth, and the only goals and values they have in life is the wealth. And they, once they have the wealth, they don't know what to do with them. They don't know what to do with their lives. You start a company in Silicon Valley at age 20, age 25, you're a centimillionaire. What do you do with the rest of your life? You have no real, beyond the work, and you've done the work, and you've got enough money so you never have to work again. You sold the company, so you're not involved in the company you started. You could start another company, but you're just going to have less fire in your belly because you've already made so much money. And you don't know exactly what interests you. And what do you do with all the money? And what do you do with the rest of your life? For most people, the fact that they don't have a lot of money or they don't have that kind of money keeps them going, at least in productive activity. But because productive activity is not viewed as a virtue, it's not viewed as something to get meaning from you for your life. People don't want to even engage in this. They get the money and they kind of retire at age 25. It's not going to be a good life if you retire at 25. I know some of you think it is, but it's not. All right. Zach says, thank you for covering the topic of Rome. I love whenever you cover Greece and Rome, Roman history. It's absolutely fascinating to me. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. Andrew, is David and Goliath an altruistic story? Are the real enemies giants in your view? No, it's not an altruistic story. I mean, Goliath is attacking with his forces, is attacking David and his people. If David doesn't stand up to Goliath, David is probably going to be slaughtered in the attack to come. Somebody has to stand up to Goliath, and it's in your self-interest to destroy the enemy that's going to destroy your life and destroy your family and destroy everything that you care about. So no, David and Goliath is not at all. David is not an altruist for standing up to Goliath. Are the real enemies giants in your view? They often appear to be giants, and they often can be giants. Putin looked like a giant before the war. For some people, he's still a giant. People still treat him as if he's a giant. You would have thought that this war had brought him down to size, to his true size, which is very, very small. But he's not really a giant in the sense that he can be defeated. And I think that's part of the power of the David and Goliath story. It's that evil often appears to be a giant. Enemies often are viewed to be giants, but with the right skill and the right determination and the right courage and the right ability, giants can be defeated. Giants can be overcome. They're giants in a particular form. But, look, Russia is a giant as compared to Ukraine. And look how Ukraine is standing up to Russia by using better technology, by being better motivated, by all of that. It can stand up to a giant like Russia and make the giant look like something very small. So the story is incredibly powerful. Stories are incredibly important and tools. And in this sense, Jordan Peterson, when he talks about stories, mythologies, is absolutely right. I think he then has a lot of wrong views about it, but he's absolutely right. And the story of David and Goliath, like a lot of biblical stories, are super important. Some of them represent real values, and one can learn from them, be inspired by them, and they have inspired people throughout history. Sometimes to do bad things, and particularly towards themselves, but often to do bad things. Jennifer says, love these shows. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm glad. All right. Maximus SX. Maximix. Yaron, do you still do public lectures, courses like you did in the past? History of the Middle East, financial crisis. I haven't done a course in a long time, an extended course in a long time. It used to be that at OCONs we used to do courses. We haven't done those in a while, so I haven't done one of those courses. I obviously do a lot of public lectures all over the world, all the time. I put them up online. You see them on YouTube. It's the more extensive courses that I haven't done. But you know, I do a little bit of that during these shows. So I've done shows on Yaron's Rules for Life that you could view that as a kind of course. I did a series of shows on the objectivist virtues. You could view that as a course. So the shows are replacing that. And you know, these last 2 shows on Rome, you could view as a little mini course on art and the city of Rome. Scott asks, what's some criteria for whether someone is taking their religion seriously? I mean, it's a hard question. I think to know whether somebody's taking their religion seriously, I mean, some of it is external manifestations of that religion. Are they going to church? You know, to what extent does their behavior, do they take seriously kind of the scriptures or the restraints on how they behave? You know, in the Jewish religion, it's fairly easy. You can often tell how seriously someone is taking their religion by what they wear, which is kind of weird, but it's true. But it's an external manifestation of how they're going to live their life. You know, in Islam, it's with women, certainly it's the same thing. If they're wearing a burqa, they're either taking their religion seriously or being forced to take their religion seriously. In Judaism, it's almost always voluntary, at least for men. But Christianity is more difficult because Christianity, of all the religions, is the most secularized. But it's the extent to which they internalize their religious assignments to the extent where they are doing things in their life because that's the right thing to do based on their religion. That their religion is what is motivating them to do the things that they actually engage in doing. And sometimes it's hard to know the sincerity of somebody and what's motivating them. It's harder psychologically with Christianity because it hides more effectively. Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's what motivates you to behave in the way they behave. The extent that it's religion and the religious dogma that is determining, or is the determining factor in how you behave and what you do and what you say, and how, to that extent, you're taking your religions seriously. And I'd say most Christians, you know, don't explicitly, although clearly their religion has shaped them, but they don't explicitly, use their religion to guide their life. It's more implicit. It's more integrated into some of the values that they already taken. Yeah, Andrew says attitude towards sex is certainly an area where religion plays a huge role. Andrew says fixation on the negative. I think that's right. Fixation of weaknesses of man. The fixation on the fact that men are weak, flawed, sinful. All of that is a manifestation of religion. But again, a lot of those could be subconscious. They might not be in the conscious awareness of the person, and in that sense, taking it seriously. Taking it seriously assumes an awareness of what you're doing. An awareness of what they're doing. Yeah. I think most people don't take their religion seriously. Most Christians don't take their religion seriously. Most Jews don't take their religion seriously. That doesn't mean the religion doesn't have a profound impact on them. But I don't think today most of them take it seriously. And I'm not sure even in the past they took it that seriously. They were too busy living. They didn't have time to take it seriously, particularly in kind of the eras that we're talking about. This is why you had to tell the stories and stuff. This was a way of reminding them of this religion and their commitment to the religion and why they're being taxed so heavily and all of that. But it's you know, to take it seriously means it's consciously, you're aware of it, and it's guiding your life. Now, you know, the evangelical movement takes its religion seriously, and there's quite a few Catholics, but I think that the dominant number of Christians in America don't take their religion seriously, and you can see that in the polls where they're saying they're non-denominational, they don't go to church, they don't do this, they don't do that. It's not in their conscious awareness; it's in the background. It's shaped their soul without them even knowing it, and that's sad. That's sad. White asked, is James O'Keefe an example of how to fight woke? No, I don't think James O'Keefe is an example of how to fight woke. I don't think, you know, showing the hypocrisy or showing they don't really believe it or showing that they're just power lusters or showing any of these things is the way to fight woke. No. And I don't think it helps. I don't think that changes anybody's mind. I think the way to fight woke is to offer positive ideas and positive vision and a positive alternative to woke ideas. And woke is appealing to certain people because woke is trying, in an awful way, in a horrible way, to address certain things that people believe are problems in society. And if you want to fight it, you have to present a positive alternative. It's just like just showing the stupidity and the hypocrisy of religion is not a way to fight religion. The way to fight religion is to offer a positive alternative vision of a world, a positive alternative set of values. Otherwise, all you're doing is creating cynics. And you might be able to destroy this particular version of woke, but what you're creating is the next version of woke. Mark Thomas says, worth researching origins of mystery religions. I'm not particularly interested. I'm not sure why it's interesting. So I don't think so, but maybe. Paulo Zeus, favorite painting. Wow, that's hard. Much harder than sculpture. Certainly, you know, School of Athens is beautiful, but it's not. It's too. I don't know. It doesn't connect on a personal level. Sistine Chapel is amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I have some paintings at home, or posters of paintings at home that I really, really love, that come closer, that I think are more personal, that I can relate to in a more personal way. Again, the themes of the Sistine Chapel, the stories, the religionism, the biblical stories are less ones that relate to me. I like my David, you know, and there's an amazing sculpture of Spartacus at the Louvre that I love. I love these more strong, you know, clearly men of action in the moment before, moment after action, not in the midst of it. So while I love Bernini and appreciate him, it's not my favorite. So I like that in painting as well, but I'm trying to think. I love some of the pre-Raphaelite paintings of the 19th century. Yeah, I'd have to really think. Favorite painting. There's so many paintings. Yeah, it's a tougher one. That's a tougher one. I'll think about it. I also showed some paintings that I really love in one of the shows in the past that you might have seen that also constitute some of my favorite paintings, or some of the paintings that I have in my home that I really love. There's a beautiful painting of Judith after she's chopped off her enemy's head. Just the power, the strength, the confidence. I like paintings that portray that. The same with sculpture. I love paintings that portray feminine beauty. Again, same with sculpture. So there's strength and beauty. Those are the two characteristics that I love. Paulo Zeus, the colors The colors, the use of red. I like the use of red as well. I've got a painting by a contemporary artist who I really like, which is just red and black, and it's gorgeous. Picart, his name is Picart. He's a Spanish painter from Barcelona who's a contemporary. He lives today. Linda says, I always enjoy your art and music talks. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Valdrin. Philip says, would you say the high prevalence of child abuse in Christianity is fundamentally a result of its metaphysics? Oh God, I mean, fundamentally everything is a result of metaphysics. I think it's fundamentally, yeah, I mean, in the sense that, it's a result of repression. It's a result of a view of original sin. It's a result of the view of repentance, that the judge is ultimately God and you can ask for forgiveness, and therefore any sin you commit in this world, big deal, because you can ask for forgiveness and God will give it to you. And God is the judge, not reality, not you, not life. It's the result of the entire system that views sex as somehow animalistic and terrible and horrific, that I think maybe drives people with certain, attitudes towards sex that then are further repressed and manifest themselves in child abuse. But yes, ultimately, it's their horrible negative view of the world. It's this metaphysical view of a malevolent universe and of man as fundamentally malevolent that drives these things. And of course, their ability to whitewash sin, get rid of sin by confessional and by a priest telling you to do 10 Hail Marys. I mean, that's stunning, right? And that opens up the world to all kinds of sin. And this is about the cover-up, right? Why is this thing covered up? It's because, well, everybody's a sinner. What are we going to do? We're going to criminalize these priests? We're going to do something horrible to them? We need priests, and everybody's a sinner. So they sin. What can you do? Everybody's a sinner. I mean, that attitude is just so disgusting and despicable. Colt says, people have asked me if I'm going to run for public office, but I think I'm less interested in that. I think promoting a better culture is more important, such as art and music. What are your thoughts? Well, I mean, I think you have to do what you love doing. I mean, what's more important to whom? To the future of mankind? Why do you care? It's changing the culture. To change the culture, you need everything. You need people who run for office who are good. You need musicians and artists. But where you're going to be more successful, where you're going to have more impact, will depend on your skills, your talent, your abilities, your interests. The way you phrase the question is a non-egoistic way of phrasing the question. The question is not, I shouldn't run for office because I won't have an impact. The question is, do you want to run for office? Is that interesting to you? Is getting involved in the world of politics today of interest, given how corrupt and disgusting and horrible it is? And if what it's going to take to change the world is going to change the culture, art and music and things like that, what kind of impact can I have? At the same time, do I love art and music and culture and these things and can I be effective at them, at doing them? And what kind of art and what kind of music are really going to change the world? So think about what you love, what's important to you, and then also objectively think about your skills, your talents, your abilities, and what it's going to take. But at the end of the day, the answer to what it's going to take a lot. The Renaissance was a lot of people, hundreds of people doing the work of the Renaissance, from historians to philosophers to artists to social commentators to budding scientists, the very beginnings of scientists, to people who were willing as aristocrats to fund all this and to promote it and to so it takes hundreds of people to really impact and change a culture in any meaningful, significant way. So so it's going to take people doing a lot of different things, in other words. All right, last question. Apollo Zeus. Ideas outside objectivism which are true. Oh, lots of ideas outside objectivism that are true. I mean, science is outside objectivism, and it's true, right? Art, the greatness of Michelangelo's David is outside of objectivism. It's true. Yeah, I mean, most true ideas are outside of objectivism. I think that's true, right? Objectivism is a philosophy. It deals with ideas in one realm. It has implications for everything else, but it deals in ideas in one realm, in truths in only one realm. Objectivism is not the truth. Andrew says, Senator Josh Hawley has written a book on manhood. Knowing where he's coming from, I was still taken aback at the degree of altruism in his saying. It is man's duty to make himself expendable and sacrifice to others. Thoughts? Oh yeah, I mean, Josh Hawley is a real intellectual. He's very smart. He takes his Catholicism super seriously, and he truly believes in this altruistic philosophy. This is why I consider Josh Hawley the most dangerous politician in America, much worse than anything the left has to offer. He is a true, what Leonard Peikoff called an M2 politician. He is the complete integration of Christianity with a kind of Americanism, with a view of America, with a view of power. I think he is the real integrationalist, Catholic, authoritarian. He has a Catholic authoritarian view of government. And a real altruist philosophically, so really, really, really bad guy. So yeah, doesn't surprise me that he thinks that it is man's duty to make himself expendable in sacrifice to others. Compare that to Rand's view of the purpose of life, of man. Okay, Deborah. Thank you, Deborah, $50. Christian abuse of children includes corporal punishment and other forms of abuse that are carried out regularly by parents to stamp out the child's sinful nature. Absolutely. The self. Not just pre-sexual abuse, I know from experience. Yeah, no, absolutely. I assumed the question was about sexual abuse, but it doesn't have to be. You're right. Generally, Christianity has a negative attitude about playfulness, about happiness, about unrestrained kind of joy, and unrestrained the children exhibit. And Christianity, religion generally, is about dogma. It's about behaving in a particular way. It's about doing the particular things that you must do, and it's trying to put you into a straitjacket at all costs, and it is unbelievably abusive to children. And it all of it comes from the concepts of original sin. I mean, and the fact that you have to drive out sin from the child, and the way to drive out sin is by force. It's by coercion. There's no other way to drive sin out. So, but yes, Deborah, I agree completely. It's the abuse is much more extensive. The sexual abuse is but one element of a much greater regime of abuse inflicted on children by religion, and it's not just Christianity. I mean, I look at these, little Muslim girls, and I think about the kind of life that they're going to lead and the kind of repression that they're going to have to suffer. And I look at these little Jewish children, and it's just so. I mean, and the more religious they are, the more horrific it is. So unbelievably sad and horrific. Richard says, I don't like most modern art. I don't like most modern art museums, and notice finer art in high-end galleries. Could the best fine modern art reside mostly in private homes? So I assume you're talking about fine art as representational art. I mean, objectively good art, objectively decent art. It could be that the good, fine art that's being produced today resides mostly in private homes. I think that's absolutely right. Most you couldn't sell it, or it's very hard to find buyers. But there's just not a lot of great fine artists because there's just not a big market. But yes, there's probably some very good art in private homes that we don't know of because it's never been put out on the market. On the other hand, the world in which we live today, where there are galleries, where there's the internet, you should be able to see more great fine art. And there's some. It's not that there isn't any, but there's just not a lot, given how many people there are on the planet, and given how many artists there used to be. There were in the past. Great artists. Robert says, in capitalism, how do you think people with Down syndrome survived or live their life, especially if they are strained on the environment, strained on resources, and they're unproductive and can't produce goods and services? Well, I mean, they only survive to the extent that other people are willing to help them survive. So if their family is willing to dedicate the resources to keeping them alive and to feeding them and to training them so they can have some kind of skill into adulthood, so they can sustain themselves to some extent, but that family continues to care for them into adulthood, or if it's not the family, maybe it's a charity or a charity program developed. But again, it's only to the extent that there are going to be people willing to do it. I think they typically are. Most families want to take care, even if they're Down syndrome child. They feel responsible for bringing the child into the world and they want to take care of it. I think there'd always be charities that took care of these children. But at the end of the day, there's no duty. So they'll only be taken care of to the extent that there are people willing to do it. And again, and I know some of you are going to hate me for this, but this is one more reason why I'm pro-abortion, not just not tolerant of abortion, pro-abortion. I think parents should have the ability to abort a child if they're not willing and they're not interested in devoting the resources to sustaining a child that's unproductive, like a Down syndrome child. I think those children should be, we should have the option to abort them. And I think having children is a big responsibility. And I'm also, to the extent that we can genetically engineer children not to have Down syndrome in the future, I know there'll be a big ethical debate about it because some people object. I think it's a good thing if we can engineer people not to have Down syndrome. So one of the benefits of modern medicine is we can tell this in advance and we can avoid it through abortion, or one day we'll be able to fix it. So, yeah, that's my. All right. I think we'll call it a night. My voice is going. All right. Thanks, everybody. It's late over here in Rome. It's 20 to midnight. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I hope you liked the show. I'll see for the rest of the week when I can do shows, but I'll try to do some shows during the rest of the week, maybe do some news updates or do some more current event kind of stuff, which I know many of you prefer. But thanks, everybody. Bonnie asked, well, what about once they're born? Once they're born, somebody has to take care of them. If nobody's willing to take care of them, they will die. But somebody has to be willing to take care of them. And usually it's the family. And if not the family, it's charity. And to the extent that there are people willing to fund a charity that takes care with children with Down syndrome, they will survive. To the extent that there isn't, then and they can't take care of themselves as adults, then they won't survive. I'm pretty sure that there would be, but again, I think the numbers of Down syndrome children would be far lower. Thank you, guys. I will see you all later in the week. Bye, everybody. Have a good night.